Hey guys, this is RolloutReviews with BIONICLE 2015 Toa Kaita Wairuha, Master of Wisdom. So I want to start by saying once again that this is not an official combination model, this is essentially a MOC. Second, I'll be referencing a lot of things that I mentioned in the previous Akamai video, so if you haven't seen that already, there'll be a link at the top of the description to go watch that. Now, unlike Akamai, this is pretty much entirely my creation. However, it does take a lot of reference from other sources. First and foremost, there's a user on BZ Power named Anchir. He's known as other things in other places, but he made a Wairuha MOC that I liked a lot of the ideas behind, but I didn't really like how it was built. Some things like the digitigrade legs, some of the color scheme, and the halves of Kopaka's shield as wings, I sort of borrowed from his design, but the fundamental build is pretty much entirely original. However, if you watched that first video, I pretty much built my Akamai entirely based off of somebody else's model. Their name is Ixvia, and that had a lot of influence in the creation of this model because, well, it's sort of based off of that, so the two Kaita match. Now, there was somebody on the Reddit post for Ixvia's Akamai that posted a picture of their own Wairuha built to match his, and I think their name was you-know-who, all one word, spelled a little weird. I'll put a link in the description to go to that Reddit post, and you'll find him comment on that page if you want to see his model. I liked a lot of things about it, but again, I wanted to change a lot of things as well. But I really liked the way he did the weapons on his creation, so I sort of borrowed some of the ideas of that for this model, and you'll see what I borrowed when we do take a look at the weapons. Once again, I just want to give credit where credit is due, because while this MOC is pretty much, like I said, my own creation in its entirety, I did take a lot of reference from other people's creations. All of that said, let's take a closer look at this guy. So we'll start with the legs, and as I mentioned earlier, the legs are digitigrade, or backwards. They're sort of like feline-esque or bird-like. And for whatever reason, I really like this characterization on Wairuha. It's something that Anchir incorporated into their model, and as I said, I really liked it. Now, you-know-who, when they were making their own Wairuha, they talked about how towards the end they were struggling to have substantial bulk in the legs for their model. Because of that, I made it a point to build this guy from the bottom up so that the legs would have enough mass to them. And they are gappy in some places, but overall I think they look pretty great. Now, you can see that pretty much the majority of the contribution of Gali in this combiner is the legs. All form the legs, that's Gali. And I mentioned in the previous video, I sort of wanted to segregate each of the contributing members so that you could clearly see where they play in the combiner. Sort of a reference to the original Kaita, because their limbs were much more simple and could easily be picked out when looking at what they created together, if that makes any sense at all. And so, yeah, Gali is the legs, pretty much, with the blue on the upper leg, the silver, the gunmetal, and a little bit of yellow at the ankle. He has this skirt armor here. Originally, I had these side pieces, the thigh armor of Kopaka, and I think it covered things a little bit better here. It made the lack of armor on the sides a little bit less apparent, but I decided to switch over to this because, well, if you had these stickers applied on Kopaka's thigh armor, it would look a little bit weird without any sticker in the center. The thigh armor is now up on his upper arm, whereas these used to be there. Again, I think it looks a little bit better the previous way, but with the stickers applied, if you do decide to apply the stickers, it looks a little bit better this way, I feel. Moving on up, The body actually has a lot of reason to it. And I mean, you might think it looks a little bit weird, maybe a little bit all over the place with things sort of just sticking out, but I would like to explain it because to me it really does make sense. So just imagine for a moment that Wairuha at his core, his skin, if you will, is translucent blue. And then over the top of that blue skin, he has white chainmail. So you see the sleeves on the upper arms, a little bit of armor here, the chainmail skirt, a little bit of armor on the wings here, and then some, light armor plating on his wings. And then over the top of that white chainmail, he has sort of a green waistcoat. So as you can see, it's here. It sort of flows out to the sides. That's what these are. And of course, there's a little bit on the back as well. And then over the top of that waistcoat, he has kind of a golden ornamental harness piece of armor here that covers his chest, hangs down off the sides here, goes over his shoulders, and hangs down on the back here as well. And if you look at it like that, it entirely makes sense, and I'm really glad it turned out as well as it did. Of course, the arms are pretty simple here. Like I said, it's got the thigh armor for Kopaka up there, and then the lower arm has the blue, the white. Very clearly, as I mentioned, you can see the segregation here, like the arms are Kopaka, the waist armor here is Kopaka. You got some Liwa underneath with obviously Kopaka armor over the top. He's got blue on the chest, sort of invoking the golly hooks on Wairuha. The original Wairuha's chest, and then of course Kopaka wings all the way here. I really like wings on Wairuha as well. I've seen a couple bits of fan art with Wairuha having wings, even before I saw Anshir's MOC, and it just fits to me. It just works, and especially with the skis as wings here, they just look really good. I don't know where the inspiration for this came from. Maybe it's the propellers on the back of Wairuha Nuva, but like I said, I like the characterization here. It really makes Wairuha unique in comparison to Akamai. Of course, I chose to use the normal green Miru instead of the golden one. There again, I called it a Miru because that's what I'm used to, but the normal green Liwa mask, and as I mentioned in the Akamai video, to differentiate it from Liwa, instead of green eyes, he's got blue eyes there. Also, I chose to use the blue eyes because he has no neon green on him anywhere else, whereas Akamai did, so the green eyes fit a little bit better. You can bring the wings out here if you want him to look a bit more grandiose, out to the side there, and that works as well. Overall, I realize he's a male character, Wairuha is, but, with the wings and the legs there, and like the chain skirt and the more regal armor, he does really remind me of like a Valkyrie. And yes, they're female mythical creatures, but especially when we take a look at his weapons, they're very Norse looking, and he's kind of got a Norse vibe to him. A Norse warrior, maybe a harpy as well. Again, a bad example because that's another typically female mythical creature, but the comparison still stands. And again, I just like how unique this guy looks in comparison to Akamai, despite being built very similarly as far as the core goes here. So, yeah. As far as articulation goes, you have some movement in the ankles forward and back here. You actually can get a little bit of a tilt out of it if you sort of twist and bend the joints right up here, so you can get something like that going. There are, a couple joints in the legs because they're backwards, but it works a little bit funny. He can only bend his leg about this far, but it can go forward much further. There is another bend here, but things start looking a little weird up there. You can reposition this armor, but because of the way these pieces are molded, if you bring this section down too far, it just sort of will fall off because there isn't enough surface coverage there, and things get a bit loosey-goosey. But if you keep it in the proper position, it's definitely solid enough. It does make him very difficult to stand, though, especially with the lack of friction in the hips because of the function that we'll explore later. But it is worth noting, the legs, they can go forward and back. They can sort of rotate here just because of the way things are attached. These knee pieces tend to fall off from time to time if you're not careful. It doesn't go out too much further than this, but again, like I mentioned with Akamai, I feel if it did go out any further, it would have an even harder time supporting itself. The skirt armor here, they're all attached on ball joints. They get out of the way pretty effectively. You can move these around if you want for some reason. The arms have friction extenders up there so he can hold his weapons without much problem. Things do start to run into things up here in a couple positions, but it's not too much of a problem. The elbows bend only about this far because of how bulky they are, but you know, you got that bend, you got the wrist joint. The head is a little limited, but things can move out of the way. Really in any position, so it's not nearly as bad as it is on Liwa. Another friction extender there, just like on Akamai, so things are very stiff, but it gets the job done. I do like how these pieces sort of fit together perfectly, like this corner fits in to that corner, just about exactly, so it looks very flush. But if you do need to move these out of the way to get the arms in a certain position or to move the head in a certain position, all of this is on joint, so you can definitely do that. And then, of course, the wings are on a couple of ball joints here. You have the Kopaka hands there, attaching them. So, I mean, you can get them folded up, you can have them out, you can, you know, splay them out. You can, well, not really fly with them, but you can have him in flight poses with all of the joints there. He's not nearly as solid and articulate as Akamai is, but I've always seen Wairuha as less of a brawler. So, I mean, it sort of fits. Even in Generation 1, you know, the Master of Wisdom here, or the Spirit of Wisdom, just seemed like a little bit less of an aggressive fighter. Just because of the mask powers he had, I always imagined him, you know, striking a pose towards the back while Akamai got into the thick of things. Because if you think about it, Akamai has mask powers at his disposal like speed and strength and shielding, whereas Wairuha has things like water breathing and X-ray vision and levitation, things used for travel and getting around the battlefield. I always saw Wairuha as using the elemental abilities much more, creating storms, and with the wings in this interpretation, you know, those storms would have very regal feathers flying everywhere, very flashy, and that's just what I see Wairuha as being, as opposed to the more aggressive Akamai. And again, like their designs, it really differentiates them and makes them unique. Next, we'll take a look at the weapons. So he has this spear here. First and foremost, let's give it to him. The tip is made out of the two Liwa swords combined, and when they come together, I really love the shape that this makes. It looks super cool. And then towards the bottom, you have the Kopaka spear tip, which actually works pretty well, because looking back to the original Wairuha, his weapon was made out of Kopaka's sword and Liwa's axe. Wairuha Nuva also had a long bladed weapon, and that sort of fits the bill as well. Next, he has this shield, and this is the main thing that I decided to borrow from you-know-who's model, sort of this spiraling shield made of axe heads here. It's a little bit different in the way it mounts to his hand, but the basic idea is pretty much exactly the same. And this here, being kind of a rounded shield, sort of reminds me of some kind of Viking shield, personally. Again, adding to that Valkyrie vibe I get from this guy as a whole. Now, just like this had some reference to the original Wairuha, this this also does a little bit, because 2001 Wairuha had a shield, and then 2002 Wairuha had like a double axe weapon in his other hand, and well, this is a shield made out of axes. Kind of the best of both worlds. I think the weapons look great for this guy. They match really well, both with each other and to the model itself. So now let's go over his functions. First, he has a simple gear function in his right arm here to swing the spear. I could have given him a double gear function, but with a shield in this hand, that wouldn't really make sense. I guess it could also act as some kind of bladed weapon, but I think that would just be kind of silly. And second, he has a gear function down here, just like on Akamai, so you can have him walk. There's an extra gear up here to sort of add a little bit of friction. Of course, some gears in here to do the same, and down there as well. But again, it's not the most solid thing in the world, and it does make him pretty difficult to stand overall, but I'd rather have this than be without it, if not just to match Akamai, and if not just to reference the original Toa Kaita. Last but not least, here is Akamai and Wairuha together at last, and I think they look fantastic side by side. Now obviously Wairuha is a bit shorter than Akamai, but honestly that's only to be expected because, well, he's made up out of smaller sets. On top of that, the only time the Kaita's height ever differentiated was in their Nuva forms, and Wairuha was way shorter for some reason. Also, the individual Toa all differentiated in height, so why shouldn't the combinations? I see so many MOCs, so many interpretations of Gen 2 Kaita that try so hard to make the two of them match so much. You know, make them match in height, make them match in parts count. And I don't think it turns out very well. You usually end up with an Akamai that doesn't look as powerful as Onua or as tall as Tahu. And same thing goes for Wairuha. I don't think there's any reason for Wairuha to be any less substantial than the three models that make it up, and any shorter than Kopaka. You know, I think these guys should be tall and bulky and imposing, and should also be unique. You know, they don't need to be the same height. And there's a lot of pieces at your disposal, and a lot of different pieces across the 6 models, especially across the 3 models that make these two Kaita up. So why make them similar just because you think you have to? I'm so glad that these turned out as well as they did. No small thanks to a few certain people who really inspired me, namely Ixvia, Anshir, and you-know-who on that Reddit post. I can't thank you enough. I'm just remembering now that I mentioned something about the stickers on Wairuha in this video, but I didn't even mention the stickers at all in Akamai's video. Ixvia's model had a Tahu chest piece on Onua's chest plate here, and when I brought the chest out, I didn't like the way that looked, so I removed that. And it does make his chest look a little bit bare, just the solid black. If you do want to apply the stickers there, I actually think it looks fantastic. I did swap it out with the chest plate on my other Onua that does have the stickers applied, and the purple and gray and gold actually look really great on this combination model if you are interested in that. So that's just for your information. Anyway, that is about it, guys, and this is IX Roll It IX signing off.